Greetings, salutations, respect, and love. I am Scott. You're in the Prog Corner, and today we're going to show some love to that great UK progressive pop band, Supertramp. Are they prog? I think they are. We've had this discussion many times. What are labels? I don't care, man. They're just awesome. So today I'm going to tell you a little story about a little band from the UK and a Dutch millionaire and an American label. I guess Supertramp was formed from the ashes of a band called The Joint. They were financed by Stanley August Mezenges, who was a Dutch millionaire. You had Ray Davies as a member of that band, and they didn't do anything, and I guess the Dutch millionaire got a little disappointed in it, so he decided he's going to form a new band. They bring Roger Hodgson in, and the basis of Supertramp was born. They originally were calling themselves Daddy, but apparently there was a band called Daddy Longlegs, and they didn't want to get that confused. The very first album had Richard Palmer James doing all the lyrics. He's the same guy that did all the lyrics for King Crimson back in the 70s during the Wettin' era. They also had Davey O'List from The Nice. Did one gig with them. Really crazy, man. But so anyway, I'm going to rank. They have 11 studio albums, one amazing live album. We're obviously not going to be ranking the live album. If we did, it'd be number one because it's amazing. But here we go. At number 11, released October 13th, 1987, the absolute nadir of Supertramp's existence. It's Free as a Bird. This was the second album without Roger Hodgson, and it's terrible, man. You've got drum machines on here. You've got electronics on here. You've got dance beats on here. You've got Mark Hart singing in place of Roger on here. This was the last record they did for A&M before A&M gave them the boot, as this album did not perform well. It peaked at 101 in the US. Not great, but there's a couple good songs on here. I do like I'm Begging You. And there's a song on here, An Awful Thing to Waste, and that certainly is thematic of Supertramp. It was an awful thing to waste, and Free as a Bird was terrible, didn't need to be released at all. At number 10, it's the final Supertramp album from 2002. This is called Slow Motion. It's definitely better than Free as a Bird, but it's real slow, and it's almost like a I did it again, Rick Davies. Man, I told myself I'm not going to say Ray Davies this whole video. Rick Davies moved to LA prior to recording this, and it's pretty much just a solo album. You've still got John Hollywell and Bob Sennenberg in the band at this point, but Mark Hart is only singing backup vocals this time. Cliff Hugo's on bass at this point, and you've got a guitar player named Carl Verheyen. There's a couple good songs on here. 10th Avenue Breakdown, especially. The final song is called Dead Man Blues, and it just goes on and on forever. It's not good. Not a good swan song for the boys at all. At number 9, it's their sophomore album, Indelibly Stamped, and I might get into some trouble showing this album cover. There were a lot of markets that they had to sell it in a brown paper bag or, put little pasty stickers on the album cover. This thing came out June 25th, 1971. It's the only album with this particular lineup. They changed the lineup after the first album. You got Dave Winthrop on flute and sax, Frank Farrell on bass, Kevin Curry on drums, and there's a couple good songs on here. It doesn't really sound like Supertramp at all. You miss that Wurlitzer, and you can hear the guys singing, and you know it's them, but it just sounds like a whole different band. But Forever is a good song. Aries is a good song. Not bad at all. Certainly their next album would be a huge improvement. At number 8, from 1997, Some Things Never Change. Their first album not on A&M Records. This was released by EMI in the UK and on some small label in the US. At least it got a release. Apparently, their last album, Slow Motion, wasn't even released in the US on physical. You had to buy a digital version of it if you wanted it. Mark Hart is singing on this. You got Cliff Hugo on bass. There's a couple decent tracks on here, not least of which is You Win, I Lose, which was a song that Roger and Rick were working on when they were talking about having a Supertramp reunion at some point. There was so many discussions about a Supertramp reunion, but Roger Hodgson is just a weirdo, and he's really hard to pin down. But I do like Say What, that's a good song, and The Light is a good song. Not bad, real low key. This album is definitely bluesy. There's a lot of jazz and lounge kind of feel to it, but it's not bad. It's all right. It's pretty good. Things get a whole lot better here. After that, at number 7, it's Famous Last Words from 1982. This was the last album with the classic lineup, and it actually even spawned a fairly decent hit with It's Raining Again. Couple other good songs. My Kind of Lady's a great track. Know Who You Are is cool. What's interesting about this album is Roger really wanted to do the album a certain way, but Rick wanted to put Brother Where You Bound on this album. It didn't fit, so they saved it for their next album, which was probably a good move. This album peaked at number 5 in the US. It's kind of scatterbrained. There's some good tracks, but it's not one of their better albums, but things are getting real good here. At number 6, it's the debut album, dropped July 14th, 1970. I love this album. I don't know why. It bears very little resemblance to what Supertramp would turn into later. Rick sounds good here, but Roger doesn't even sound like Roger when he's singing. This album was the eponymous debut, but it was called different things in some other countries. It was called Shirley in one country, and I'm Not Like the Other, I think, in Spain, and some other country called it Now and Then. This thing was reissued in 1977 to try to, capture Supertramp fever after Crime of the Century, and it did hit 158 on the U.S. charts. Richard Palmer James, I mentioned him before. He co-wrote all these songs, all the lyrics. Obviously, the songwriting team of Rick and Roger did all the music. 13 days after this album dropped, Supertramp performed at the Isle of Wight Festival with ELP and a whole bunch of other people. Try Again's a really good song, too. I like that a lot. At number 5... oh, things are getting good now. It's Crisis, What Crisis from 1975, the follow-up to their masterpiece. And they were pressed for time. Clearly, they didn't have enough time to do this album the right way, although some of the songs are really, really good. Apparently, most of these tracks were leftovers from Crime of the Century, and it does kind of sound like it, although Ken Scott produced this. At this point, the boys had moved to Los Angeles, and it does kind of give you that West Coast kind of feel. There's some good songs on here, though. I know this is like kind of the forgotten album in Supertramp's discography, but Sister Moonshine is on here, and I love that. Another Man's Woman is good, Lady's good, Just a Normal Day, and The Meaning is probably my favorite track on here. This album did all right. It peaked at number 44 in the US. At number 4, oh yeah, Brother Where You Bound from 1985. I love this thing, the first album without Roger. Rick takes over all the vocal duties. This is before he had a replacement for Roger. So it's the same lineup as Breakfast in America and Famous Last Words, but just without Roger. Cannonball was a top 30 hit for the band. I love that song. Better Days is a good song. Side 2 is just awesome, though, with that title track. Apparently, when it was first written and presented to the band, it was only 10 minutes long, but it had ballooned into like 14, 15 minutes, and you've got the great David Gilmour laying down some great guitar stuff on this song. And then the album ends with Ever Door Open, which I really, really like a lot. Oddly enough, this album did better than its predecessor. This album actually peaked at number 21 in the US, which is actually pretty good. At number 3, it's Even in the Quietest Moments. April 3rd, 1977, this thing dropped, and it's clearly better than its predecessor. Crisis, What Crisis? Definitely had an identity crisis. This one here knew exactly what it wanted to do. It knew exactly where it wanted to go. It's lush. It's beautiful. It's got Fool's Overture on it. It's got the big hit, Give a Little Bit. Do not listen to the Goo Goo Dolls version of it. But there's also Loverboy, From Now On. Fantastic. I really, really like this album. The album cover's cool. It was recorded at the Caribou Ranch in Colorado, so it's definitely got a different feel to it, a different spirit to it than any other Supertramp album. And it peaked at number 16 on the U.S. Billboard charts, which is pretty phenomenal. At number 2, it's Breakfast in America, the album that just exploded and took Supertramp to whole new levels of acceptance, and I just love it. It's just amazing. This album had 4 hit songs on it. Goodbye Stranger hit number 15. Take the Long Way Home hit number 10. The Logical Song hit number 6. And even Breakfast in America was a single. It hit like number 62 or something like that. This album won 2 Grammys, 1 for packaging and 1 for engineering. It hit number 1 in the U.S., as it should have, and it has sold over 20 million copies worldwide. For most bands, this would be their best album, absolutely, for sure, without a doubt. But this isn't just any band. This is Supertramp, for crying out loud, and their masterpiece from 1974. It was dropped on September 13th of that year, and it's crime of the century, man. Nothing comes close to it. Recorded in Trident Studios. There was definitely some magic going on in the studio walls there. Ken Scott engineered and produced this thing. It only hit number 38, but it set the band up for success. This was their do or die album. The first 2 albums did terrible. In fact, the Dutch millionaire said, see you later after the second album. He was done throwing good money in after bad. But he should have stuck around for one more album, man. He would have seen the fruits of his labor pay some dividends. As Crime of the Century has School, it has Dreamer, it has Rudy, it has that amazing title track. It is perfect. There's a reason why Crime of the Century ranks in the top 20 in almost every progressive rock album's ranking I've ever seen. Rolling Stone had it in their top 50 Prog albums of all time, and rightly so. It is an absolute masterpiece, and Supertramp was actually a really easy band to do the discography. There's very little leeway there. I think most people are in basic agreement about what's good in that discography and what's not so good, but I just love this band, and I wanted to do them some justice, because as I scoured the internet, I wasn't seeing a Supertramp albums ranking on YouTube, so I wanted to do that. It usurped and kind of cut in front of IQ, who was gonna be my ranking today, but I had to do Supertramp. Next week, I'm really excited, boys and girls. There's a couple great albums coming out of Norway, out of Charisma Records. The Lars Fredrik Frosley solo album, the keyboard player from Wobbler, his very first solo album, and Seven Impale dropped their 3rd album next week. Or actually, Friday they dropped their new album, and I'm really excited because I loved the first 2, so I will be doing reviews of those 2, absolutely. Anyway, I am Scott. You're in the Prog Corner, and just remember, boys and girls, be kind to children, old people, animals, and the disabled. If you're giving any of those people a hard time in those categories, you're not a good person. Be a good person. Peace in the Middle East, and God save the king. I'm out.